Hello everybody, welcome to Cause and Effect, a show about Vetes. This is our Christmas special, and today we are going to talk about talking. More precisely, we're going to have a discussion about dealing, how to make them and how to break them. But before we go into today's subject, I would like to introduce my cross-table buddies, Isak Erspersson Bjärmark and Adam Erspersson. Say hello everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay, so but before we go on, let's, as usual, talk a little bit about our Vetes week. Adam, how's your Vetes week been?
It's been good. Actually, I had an extra day of playing Vetes cards just this Friday, so I played Friday and Wednesday. I'm still on quite a streak with the hotel deck, the one with Jaume.
Yeah.
Out of 4 games, I won all 4.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, it's been good.
So
I played some of my other decks as well, of course, but the Jaume deck has been very successful.
So are you gonna play it on the Boxing Day tournament, maybe?
I don't have all the cards, so I need to borrow cards to. Yeah, I haven't actually played Giovanni at all, so I don't have Sudario. I don't have acquired venture assets.
Morgue Hunting Ground.
Don't have more hunting around, so yeah. I'm
The
a bit
family
short.
mechanic.
I don't need him. He's fine. It's fine without him. But I'm experimenting with Giovanni now anyway, and it's fun.
Cool. Isak, that brings me. Isak, I've heard that you maybe have a complete Vetes card collection. Is that true?
Complete.
Complete. Sorry.
Close enough, I'd say. I'm missing some of the rare cards you need in abundance, like Elder Sarkolo and Chameleon maybe. There's some cards left. It's not a lot.
Or Madness Quill,
Sorry.
Madness Quill.
Yeah, that one too.
Yeah.
I only have 3 of them. Yeah, there's a few holes in the collection. I should just go out on eBay and buy them and be done with it, but then there's work and I haven't been bothered to do it.
Yeah, but you have a full-time job now, so you could do it.
Yeah, I could. I probably should as well. It's like, okay, I haven't been bothered to do that just yet.
Mm.
But it started to get kind of vulgar how many cards I have.
Vulgar. Oh.
Yeah, one of the players in Gothenburg's keep on peeking me about it.
Oh yeah, it's a Western world problem.
Yeah, you could say that. It's really, yeah.
And it's your wife's and your friends' cars as well.
Yeah. We're 3 altogether. But one could say that I am administrating the collection, the buying and selling and trading.
Yes, and touching and caressing and feeling and sleeping with them under the pillow and.
But then they get like dents if you have them under the pillow, and you want them in mint, so can't be done.
Of course. Okay, so how has your Vetes week been besides pilling with your collection?
I don't remember much. I might have won. I might have won a game, possibly this Monday. But what I probably did. Yeah, I won 2 games Monday. But that's not as important. It's a lot more important that my greatest achievement was backousting my predator, and the only result of that was that the new predator killed me.
Yes, as it should be.
I felt really smart though, because there was this really peculiar situation where I played a grinder and my prey was an Auspic Greenie, and that's like you can never oust that. But my ground prey had taken 2 VPs, or taken 1 VP, and then I back ousted, and then she'd taken 2 VPs, and then the Auspic Greenie end up in a situation where if the Auspic Greenie want the game win, he can't back oust me, so you have to keep me alive if he wants the game win. So I felt really, really clever.
But
you failed to keep you alive.
You failed.
It ended up with Ida winning, so. But
at least what is Sweden didn't win.
Yeah, that's a small victory in a cruel world.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it ended up with a 3-2 split, so all in all it was okay, but it's like poor Peter getting back ousted, and then I just plop die. Just because the Austrians really didn't have any eagle sight for me.
Yeah. My week was good. I rediscovered power bleeding. I built
Have you ever undiscovered it?
Yeah, I was fiddling in some blocking and I played a lot of combat. Built a ESC deck that didn't perform that well. And then I rediscovered power bleeding and I won. So, I'm playing some Kiasids, which was awesome.
Yeah,
Is that govern conditioning with the stealth cards?
Yes.
Sounds good.
it's brilliant.
Yeah, that crypt is just ridiculous. And I actually just net deck the deck that your wife Ida won with the last tournament in Gothenburg.
It's my deck.
It's really, that deck is really neat.
It's your deck, Adam.
Yes, it's my deck. Yes, it's pretty good.
Yes. So, and I've played the Venture Law Firm 1 and 2. as well.
You didn't pick 3 and 4?
No, not.
We had this conversation. You should have picked 3 and 4.
Yes, I will next time.
Good.
So, anyhow, today we're going to talk about dealing, which is it's a very broad subject. So it will be a lot of speculations and probably we don't know that much, but we will try. I don't know. It seems very broad. What do you think, Adam?
Yeah, I think we are lacking a bit for terminology when we're talking about dealing, because it can include so many different things. Hopefully, we amongst ourselves will get a bit clearer after this discussion, because it is so broad and it includes so many different things that are actually extremely different. So,
Yeah.
just the word dealing is kind of hard to use. So
Isaac?
hopefully.
Yeah, it's very, or rather, the definition of dealing isn't set in stone, and it includes all from like dealing for entire tables, discussion who will get what VP, to like I rescue your vampire, you rescue mine, to proposing a deal to force a third party to act in a certain way. So it's very different things you can do when you're talking about dealing. And there's also a lot of like the poker element of Vitas, like bluffing and psychology and going all in, and I don't know, words to see someone, all that stuff.
Call someone's bluff.
Yeah, call someone's bluff, stuff like that.
Yeah, because it's really like an element of betas that is so difficult. It's not just playing your cards; it's also playing with your mouth.
Yeah.
Which is extremely hard, because the cards they're not constructed to be used with your
Anyone's
mouth.
mouth at all.
Have you tried tapping a card with just your tongue? It's
No.
really hard.
I suspect Isaac has.
Why would I ever?
A lot of people, but I mean, you hear about people as well that hate dealing and just shut up, I'm playing my game. What do you think about that, Isaac?
That's also a form of dealing. Or at least it's the aspect of dealing. That is to have the attitude that in this particular game, with this table and my deck, I will lose if anyone starts talking. Either because of time limits, or the only possible deal that will turn up is a deal that is bad for me, like damages me, like directly or indirectly. One of those two things. It could also be a person who doesn't entirely grasp the game. It could be like playing that meaning playing badly,
Or not entirely grasping the language, I think.
Yeah,
if you don't have a good grip on the language and everyone else around the table has, you're at a huge disadvantage. So if you can guilt other players into not making deals, either with you or even better amongst themselves, you're going to be in a big advantage.
How do you mean by guilt?
Well, if I say at a table, I do not deal, I hate deals, deals is the worst thing ever, you put the notion in people's head that deals are somehow bad, and they might that might hinder them from proposing a deal, or at least thinking a split second extra about the deal. I don't know. It's more like of a possibly a psychological phenomena. I don't have any supports for this, but support.
This kind of brings me into one of the subjects that I thought we were going to talk about today: sportsmanships in dealing. How do we tackle that problem? How can you strike a deal and still act sportsman-like?
I think that because, well, do you mean sportsman-like or do you mean friendly?
Yeah.
Because sportsman-like is regulated by the rules. You can't be too much of an ass,
Okay.
but you can be a bit of an ass. So do you mean the illegal one, or do you mean they just
Friendly. Let's take it in by the rules then. At first.
by the rules? You should always, like, if someone wants to talk about the deal, you have to give them the option to talk about it within reasonable time. So you can't, like, no, shut up, I'm trying to play. You can't do that if it's the first thing they say. That's illegal. So, of course, that's not... I presume people do this anyway, because it can be extremely efficient.
And it's also very hard to regulate, because I don't know the exact wording by heart, but it's very non-specific, the rules about sportsmanship like conduct. But basically, all in all, it's don't be too much of an ass. That's the basic idea. But how do one draw the line? What's one person's individual personality, which results in possibly anger or passive aggressiveness, cursing. It can also, at least in Europe, be a lot of cultural differences. How do one resolve a conflict? How do one start a deal? And that could be very different depending on which country you're from, but also depending on possibly class or religion or something like that. So there could be a lot of factors working into one perceiving as maybe being just emotional, and another person perceiving that emotional as being aggressive.
Okay.
So there could be some of that difference as well when it comes to just like the sportsmanship part of it.
So what do you guys try to think about to keep it sportsmanship like? I don't really know that word. Yeah.
I don't think about it that much, but in the sense that I need to be sportsmanship like. It's not that what's going through my head. In my head, it's like the one moment I lose my temper, I lose a lot of leverage towards the other four people. Maybe not short term. Maybe short term I can be really aggressive and they leave me be. But long term, like say after 20 minutes of the game, and then possibly years to come, if you perceive me as a non-negotiable person, an aggressive person, a person who can't compromise and stuff like that, that you need to be perceived as friendly, reasonable, and willing to make compromises, and just in general be a nice guy. You get a lot more of being a nice guy than being a really aggressive guy, I think, at least.
Okay. Adam, do you have anything?
Yeah, but if you want to talk about, because sometimes that leverage of being more aggressive or less aggressive can give you a benefit. And if we want to talk about concrete, I think what Isaac said is very valuable, is that it might give you a huge advantage short term, say for the next 10 to 15 minutes. So if you want to be extremely aggressive to get one advantage to try and win a tournament with, that should be during the last 15 minutes of a game.
Okay.
Like when if it's the last deal that's ever going to be possible for a game, you can be aggressive or more unfriendly during that last deal making than you could in the beginning. When you sit down immediately, I think it's important to be very friendly and shake hands and be respectful and be reasonable.
And possibly bring candy to the table. Just so everybody
If you have some candy, it's extremely good to bring some candy and offer them around the table. And that's good.
But are people that gullible?
Yes.
But it's not
And
true.
also, I believe on a subconscious level, people are. They would like me more if I gave them candy than the other guy that didn't.
Commercial works. It's the same principle. We see stuff we like, we associate that with the person that gives it to us.
Yeah.
Yada yada. It like, I'm not saying it will give you a game win. I'm just saying it'll make an ounce of a difference at least. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think the more important part is just being friendly in the beginning. That's crucial. And then if you need to, you can turn up the aggressiveness later on.
Yeah, but I think I really do think that you need to stay off the aggressiveness.
Yeah, of course, that's my preferred method as well. But in some cases, if you see an opening and you can only get through that opening by being aggressive, then you might decide to do that. And it's a lot. You can get away with it during the last 15 minutes of a game, but you might not be able to get away with it during the first 15 minutes of a game. That's the only thing I'm saying.
It depends also what you put into the term aggressive. Do you mean like a calculated sociopath aggressive, like you have like a plan in your head, or like emotional aggressive?
I'm talking about being more sociopathic, yeah.
Yeah.
If there's some specific goal that you need if you need someone, say, if you want to guilt someone into not doing something aggressive against you, that kind of guilt might require a lot of pressure, and if you do that early on in a game, people will be not interested in making deals with you later on during the same game.
Yeah.
So you might not choose to do that early on because of, I don't know. It's purely hypothetical. I don't think most people, and I don't even play the game like this, but it's important to know that if you're being aggressive early on, it impacts the game a lot more than if you're being aggressive later on.
Okay. So, yeah, before we go into more like hypothetical of how you make a deal and when you make them and such, I would also like to ask, like, are there any unfair deals, Adam?
Yes. If you're making deals with people who don't realize a bit of how the rules work, and there are some deals that say I can give you a deal that says, okay, you get to oust your 3 next preys, and when we're in the duel, I'm gonna win the duel because our decks are like this.
Okay.
If that player giving that deal to is a new player, he might not know that it's illegal to keep that deal, or how you want to see it. At some point, I'm going to break that deal because I want to win the game. Obviously, that's why I play. And if someone is really new, they might not realize what's actually going on. It's a lot over the head, and it's a bit unfair. It's unavoidable, and the only way to learn is to be subjected to it. So I'm not gonna. It's not like shame on you. You made an unfair deal, but sure, I'd call that unfair. I don't know. It's
in more or less every deal made is unfair. In one way, it's unfair because there will always. I think this is like the case in 9 cases out of 10. It's like that there is someone who will benefit more. There's no like equal partnership when you do a quid pro quo or for a rescue, something like that. There's always one person who's gaining a little bit more through that. That doesn't mean it's a bad deal for the person who gains less. It's just like it might be necessary to gain that even though you gain less than you give away. But so in a way, I think basically every deal is unfair. Someone will benefit more from it. But to connect with what Adam was talking with, the part of being unaware of specific areas of the game, I think that happens a lot, even with very experienced players. But you can, with the right choice of words and a smile, you can basically make them forget about one aspect of the game. It's like, okay, before you call a vote, for instance, I have this vote, it deals 5 damage to your prey. What you think? Oh, that sounds great. I'm all for it. Okay, here's Reigns of Power. And you neglected to mention that that person takes 6 pool damage himself, for instance.
Yeah.
Or it gives you 6 pool, or something like that, that you neglected to say, and they're like, oh. And then they end up in a situation where they need to break the deal, or they're like, but it's good enough either way, why didn't you mention that? And then the person who posted it like, oh, I forgot, I'm sorry. So a lot of that, like lying about lies, electing not to say certain things that can make you trick people, and not just like newbies, like Adam proposes, like really experienced players who forget something.
So okay, so I think everybody we got a soft beginning. Let's dive right into it. So why do we make deals, exactly?
Make.
Yeah. Why?
Because a few episodes back we talked about the relative strengths, being that if you take all the stuff a certain player have and you do that with all 5 players and you compare them, and then you decide who's in better position when it comes to winning the game, and then you have a relative strength of the table. And if there's someone that has a relative strength that's higher than yours, you probably need to make some deal. If you don't have like a forecast, or what you should call it, that you will gain on that relative strength advantage of that particular player. One way to gain on that advantage from the third party is to engage one of your crest-table buddies in a deal that will lower that person's relative strength, and and that in some way helps you. And I'm not going to get very theoretical, but did you follow my train of thought?
Yeah, kinda. Adam, did you follow?
Yeah, I think if one player on the table is having a good time,
having a good time,
you can make a deal with someone else.
So he has a bad time. Turn
To increase
upside down.
You can make a deal with someone else around the table to increase your own standing, your own and that player's standing relative to the first mentioned other player. So it can balance out. If it looks like X is going to win within 2 turns, a deal can make it so that X, Y, or Z can win in the next 2 turns. You can balance the playing field, or even level the playing field by making a deal.
So that kind of brings me on my next question. Okay, so we know why you need to level the playing field, kind of. So when?
You need to... something that's really important is that first you need to realize someone else is about to win, but then you need to find a way that it's not only appealing to yourself, but also appealing to someone else. And that's really important. Sometimes you can trick people into doing stuff that'll make you almost auto-win.
Okay.
A lot of the best players do this regularly. They're really, really good with words. I'm not one of those players, so I wouldn't know how to do it. But it does happen. But if you're not manipulating someone, you need to find a way that increases someone else's chances by enough that that person also thinks it's a good idea.
So you're kind of talking about spotting the deal when you're in a bad situation.
Yeah, exactly. And see if there's an opponent, there's a situation where you can make a deal. And it's not only about, say, okay, if I make this deal with my cross-table buddy Grand Prix, sure, I might be able to win very easily, but that deal is unrealistic. My Grand Prix can never accept this deal. It's too good for me, or too bad for him, or her. And then you can see, okay, but if I do a deal with my Grand Predator instead, it might not make me automatically win, it might just help me a little bit. But it helps that player a little bit. In that way, it's a realistic deal. And those are the deals that are, well, that's what you should be able to go for, because they'll probably work. You don't need to manipulate someone, you just need to instruct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Isak?
Yeah, I want to expand on the unrealistic deal. I'll just want to beat the drum for the unrealistic deal. I propose the unrealistic deal.
Okay.
To a player.
So, can you be a little bit more specific? Maybe an example.
Yeah, but one game in Paris, I had my Grand Predator playing some vote deck that vote locked me. I were playing girls, and I was like, couldn't you just do reckless in my prey instead? And it's like, what can I gain from that? And then my answer is, I'll start transferring as hard as I can. And he's okay. So that's a very, very rude deal, but it worked out.
Yeah.
So what happened was, I continued to do the same thing as I intended to do, play Yellow Valley and transfer really hard, but my prey was ousted.
Yeah, so that's actually one of the best deals, when you just do what you're supposed to do and just trick other people that it's a deal.
Yeah, you tell the other person, trick, I don't know.
Trick, I don't know. Okay.
The cards was on the table, I just told him what my purpose was, but I made him believe that what I proposed, I were giving something away.
Yeah.
So the way I laid my words, it was perceived by him as though I were giving something away. But in fact I wasn't. I was just like, I were giving away my exact same strategy. I didn't change anything.
Yeah.
So, but the other thing is, the reasonable answer from this particular predator would have been no. And then you have they're like, if you're talking about door-to-door salesmen, they have this two strategies: either foot in the door or
Door in the face.
door in the face. Yeah, and that is a door in the face strategy to trying to sell a deal. Okay, how about this then? And then you propose something that's probably more or less as rude, but not as rude.
Okay.
And then you start working downwards from the really, really rude deal.
So
and then you might end up with a deal that is slightly better than the realistic deal.
So it's the old trick of asking to borrow like $1,000 and then just ending up with 100, but you only wanted 100.
Yeah, now you end up with 150 and you only wanted 100.
Oh.
Yeah, but that's the psychology behind that position of deal making or arguing or selling or whatever you want to use. The other one is where you start off with what Adam is asking, when you have foot in the door. That is, you start small and try to work. So you start with, how about a kind 2-2? And then you accept that, and then you add something else. And I can do a con boon afterwards. And then you don't bleed me. And you after the person says yes to the first thing, says yes to the next thing, and then you add more stuff. So those are the two basic strategies to making a rude deal, in my opinion. And I'm maybe not infamous, but I've done some rude deals in my life.
But I need to give it not only as an influence strategy, but just asking someone if they're open to a deal. They might be open to something that you've not like figure out or have some extra information that you don't have. So just proposing it can't really hurt. You're making it unrealistic. Can you back out your my prey? And if they say no, fine, okay, let's move on. And then you just don't talk about that anymore because it's not interesting. You can do that as well, and it doesn't cost anything.
Yeah.
And sometimes it'll work out fine.
So, yeah, to get a little bit more on the dot here, like realistic tips, like how do you make a deal? It's kind of hard because it's so situational, but what do you guys think, Adam?
If you want just like a generalization, I would say figure out which deals are possible and how much they can benefit you, and weigh that against how likely they are to succeed.
Okay.
And you, like, the safest deal or with the best benefit, the best risk reward calculation, you start with that one, and if that doesn't work, you move down your priority list. That's like a general thing, I think. But I think it's important to point out that the second person you ask might be a bit hurt, or you'll have less influence over the second person, because that person will feel as a second choice. So it's important to have a good plan for your deals before you start making them, I think.
Yeah, especially that part with, like, you have two cross-table buddies. Which one is more likely to agree on a certain deal? Because as Adam said, the one who you go to after that will be very reluctant, in most cases, to make a deal.
Okay.
But also, it's about finding stuff to deal about. I don't know, a lot of times I get the questions, shouldn't we make a deal? It's like, yeah, sure, what about? And then they propose something, or they're just like, I don't know. Because there's nothing to deal about. Say, you're playing a stealth speed deck, and some other guy is playing a stealth speed deck, and one of the guys tells the other guy, should we deal? Yeah, sure, but we're playing stealth speed, there's nothing to deal with.
Yeah.
So certain decks or certain makes you end up in a situation where you actually can make deals, and votes being the most obvious one. And after that, the vote part, I'd say you end up in a situation where you and another non-combat deck are being menaced by a combat deck. And the most obvious deal in that situation is, let's rescue one another from torpor until that bastard runs out of red cards.
So that's like dealing 101. Or
Yes.
Now, that's more or less... Because then you end up in a situation that might be very, very bad for both of you. But in 3 turns or 4 turns, whatever it can be, all your guys in torpor, and the only way to work around that is to preemptively start rescuing one another. And this is especially true if there's a block deck somewhere on the table, or even if the combat deck is a block combat deck, then it's basically necessary to cross table a rescue to avoid getting blocked.
so, but
But those are the two most obvious situations, in my opinion. The rescue one another deal, and the I have a vote card, let's do something cool with it.
okay. So how do you know what's one's limits when it comes to dealing? When somebody proposes a deal to you, how should you respond? How should you try and make that deal as beneficial towards you as possible?
Oh, difficult question. This is what makes dealing probably one of the hardest part of the game, because to know the impact of a certain deal, you have to be like one of those chess players who have like 17 moves, or like possible moves in their head, depending on which path at a particular moment you start walking down.
Yeah.
So you have to arrive like, what happens if there's no deal? Then we walk down this path, and this happens, and that bound gets out, and then I end up with 0.5 because it's going to timeout. Or if we do this deal, it end up like this and this and this, and it end up with me with 1.5. And you have to have all these paths in your head ready to know what a certain deal is what impact it's going to have for you. And being able to see this far into the future and make a calculated move depending on it, or calculated risk, requires immense playing knowledge, like literally knowing the game so damn well, so it's like you can do it in your sleep.
Yeah.
So like,
because there's always the possibility they will make a deal with someone else that's less beneficial towards you. What do you think, Adam?
Yeah, something that what Isaac is talking about, trying to understand what's going to happen with different conditionals, is also to realize how weak am I during different stages of this deal. some deals might require you to go down on 2 pool with all your minions tapped, and at that point you can very easily be deal broken. And that's something that makes it even more complex, is to, okay, at any given stage someone might break that deal, and how large is that risk? It depends very much on, apart from how easy it is to deal break, but also on how good you know that player. And that's extremely hard to think about, because some players you've only played for with 45 played with for 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And that makes deals which require trust really hard to do. But that's only a subcategory of deals. Not all deals require trust. But if we're talking about those kinds of deals, that's really hard.
Yeah, and this like foreseeing what happens down a specific path, depending on the choices you make in the now, is what is the reason why it's really easy to get fooled or tricked when it comes to a deal.
Okay.
Like if you are inexperienced and you have a really hard time to seeing the progression of the game and where it's going to end up, it's very easy that you get tricked. And there's where you get all these reassurances from the other part of the deal maker or deal proposer, and you get a lot of reassurance, and you feel really, really safe, and you completely trust this guy. And then 2 rounds later,
Stab you.
BAM!
That player might already have realized that this deal makes you tap out and you just die to your predator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so what would you say is the most common mistake in deal making, Isak?
Oh, you have to give me a second.
I think too much trust.
Yeah.
Because that's like the experienced players, or some players, don't. They're prepared to deal break, and might even make a deal that they have all intentions of keeping, but they're not honest about their thought processes. For instance, that part, they might make a deal which ultimate purpose is to have you kill yourself, and you might not even realize.
Okay.
So they'll be like, okay, I'm gonna do this stuff, and you're just gonna tap out and try to kill your prey, and with all knowledge that you're not gonna succeed and you're going to die to a predator, and that's going to happen. And if you trust the player and take their words at face value, you might end up in situations like that quite a lot. And that's not really deal breaking. It's just, well, being dishonest from the get-go, I guess.
Yeah. We have a guy in the chat that agrees with the trusting part being the most difficult. I agree that to a certain extent that's the most difficult part. But another really difficult part is that a lot of games have ended for me and it's like, oh shoot, there were no chance in hell for me, and there was this circumstance and I couldn't do shit about it. And then someone else, but couldn't you have made a deal with X? You're like, yeah, that would have been very good. It's like, in a lot of situation videos, you end up in a situation which is unsolvable when you're only talking cards and only like each man for himself. But you could have solved that particular situation with a deal. It's like, yeah, he played a vote deck, and he also needed that player ousted, because otherwise none of us two would have won.
So you would say like the most common mistake is not making the deal, not being able to spot the deal.
No, yeah, simply realizing the truth. There is a deal to make.
Positivistic thinking.
A little bit of matrix knowledge going on.
Yeah,
but I agree. Yeah, it's a really hard problem to solve, I guess.
Yeah.
Because sorry, go ahead.
I would say like one of the most common mistakes is just accepting deals that are so non-beneficial, more beneficial to the one who's trying to make the deal with you, and you accept it, and then it was a lot more beneficial to the guy who wanted to make the deal.
Yeah, there's no quid pro quo. It's just like quid.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about that, because there are different types of deals. There are just, you'll bring my guy up Torpor and I'll bring your guy from Torpor. That's quid pro quo. But there are also like long-term deals. What's your thought process about the long-term deals, Adam?
I think, isn't that like what we're talking about? At least that's what I had in mind when we were talking recently now.
Okay.
I'm thinking about the long-term deals as the ones where this player's strength is too high. We need to increase our strength relative to that other players, and that's like a long-term thing, where you say to each other, "Isn't X about to win, or isn't X going to win this table?" And the table agrees. Okay, yes, it seems like it. We need to do something, and that's kind of a long-term deal.
Okay.
But and those might start, as Isaac said, with a kind of foot in the door approach, where you like, okay, it seems like X is going to win. Let me do this for you, so you can have an easier time.
Yeah.
And then the next turn, the other player might reciprocate and do something to make you survive. But
that's also a way of building trust in the middle of a game, which can be really difficult in a huge tournament like the EC, where you probably only know a fraction of the people there. At most tables you end up with 2, 3, or 4 players that you have no idea what their attitude towards dealing is.
yeah.
I had one of those really like obvious examples this EC. I had my prey, some German guy, and I had my Grand Prey, and my prey goes calling a Laster. And the prey can block it, because this is like a new Bruja deck, so there's possibly one stealth card, and there were Enkidu who had some interest. And he's like, what are you going to get? And the German guy like cashes like, I'm going to get my helicopter. I was like, okay, fine, no block. And me, I wasn't playing in blocks, so no block. And then he goes get an AK-47.
Aww.
It's like this trusting, like poker face, like no, I'm going to get my helicopter. And right there, from the get-go, it's like you have set the mood for the table.
But isn't that an example of a quid pro quo deal? If you're saying, in exchange for me letting you get a helicopter, you can get a helicopter
Shot
instead
to
of
torpor?
you can get a helicopter instead of an AK. Even though both players could have screwed each other over.
Yeah, the initial deal is a quid pro quo. No block, you get a helicopter. It's probably good for you, but not as dangerous as an assault rifle like AK-47. But in this case, he broke the deal.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to ask you guys on air. Should we take a break and have a second part, or should we just move on 15 minutes and then close the shop?
I think we can manage without a break. Isaac?
I think we should have a break.
Okay, then I think we should have a break. So we'll have a break and then we'll come back in part 2, where we will talk a little bit about king making, reputation, and how to break a deal.